Audio, view, make larger. Um, Yay. Took me a fair little bit to get logged in. Here we go. Spotlight so I can see what's going on. Admit all. And oh, too far. This way. All right. Admit all. Okay, of course. And so, see if there's anything left we needed to talk to in that last chapter, crimes against persons. I can't remember where we left off. So good when we pick up from there. Review for our first exam. We should have been our midterm, but we're running behind schedule. And so let's see where we're at. Admit. Okay, is that the last one? Nope, not that one. Here we go. 6. Persons. Yeah, so we finished with bullying. We were talking about bullying and stalking and cyberbullying. But we did finish this last time. Excellent. Basically, the last thing I was talking about related to these items was the fact that it shows how sensitive we are as a society when you start looking at these types of areas, because what is it we're trying to regulate at this point in time? We're trying to regulate not just overt actions, but also negative interactions, basically at all. We have some small levels of malevolence there, but they can have some very serious effects. Basically, start looking at theirs. Let me move this right here better. Back there. The only problem with putting it on the screen in the back is I have to strain to read that size of font. But if you need anything, feel free to type. But I prefer you guys sound off if you guys have questions or anything like that. And so that includes cyberbullying. So that's going to be something that increases over time. There's going to be more and more of that. If you start thinking about those types of things and regulatory actions that relate to that, bullying, cyberbullying, start looking at social media, start looking at all the regulations that have happened there. So far, they've happened on the corporate side. That's why they do it that way, because the government can't necessarily regulate it. But if you really look at it, there are some really, really big issues there that will be decided probably in the next few years. Basically, we start talking about there is some of the freedom of speech stuff, the online territory, which is Section 230, I think is what it's called. Basically, it's the protections to those types of organizations for hosting said content, but not being liable, not liable, but liable for the things that are posted. And if you really get into it, basically the underlying argument there is at what point in time are you simply a place, like a board where people can post stuff up on, and at what point in time are you controlling what's getting posted up there? Because if you're controlling it, basically that starts to put you into that editorial process. If you were an editor, if you curate, if you control it to a high degree, whatever that degree is, high, medium, low. At some point in time, you're no longer just bored. You're more like a newspaper kind of thing where you're putting forward a message. And so that's something that will get regulated in the future. You guys are curious about that, but that's a little bit more specialized kind of in terms of cyber stuff, communications, and where it's going now. And so from there, I think that was the last thing I needed to talk about related to that. Otherwise, we need to do a review. So this will be our first exam in here. We only have 2 exams. Don't freak out. These are all based off the same materials you're taking the quizzes on. That's why I do it that way. It's basically the test retest method. So you're all familiar with the material and you've been exposed to it a couple different times. I'm just going to range from the beginning to chapter 6. That's going to be basically from the introduction, elements of law, defenses. Let's see what else is there. Homicide, crimes against persons, those types of items. In terms of the things that you need to know for today. All right. What are the goals of criminal law? You guys know what goals are? That's early in the semester. Seems like a lifetime ago, doesn't it? Okay. So the first thing you need to think about is people use it in a negative way, so it's retributive in nature, right? You have those types of goals, retribution, rehabilitation. We start getting into what incapacitation. What was it that I actually was looking at here to keep me into that? Oh, there's the retribution element. Remember that? That's one that we had a specific case that dealt with that. That recognized retribution as a valid goal for this system. Be familiar with what that is, with that case, what that underlying argument is. All right. Elements. When we talk about basic elements of law, what are they? So you have the two big ones that are always going to be outlined within the law itself, and then you have some that are, I guess you'd say. Do you remember those? Yeah. Hence, that those two things are, I forget what the term is, basically linked. God, I should remember that term. Long day already. So these things have to correlate. Your act and your intent as they align, you get into those, well, different degrees and that kind of thing. Let's see here. Actually, correct the sleeve. Ooh, causation. That's what it is. If they're correlated, they link, and they cause some type of harm. So that's where you get into it, the last ones. Moving forward. How is civil law different from criminal law? Biggest one's punishment, right? Criminal law has sanctions, which basically, well, they do. They remove your freedoms. Or civil law is only monetary. Different rules there too, different systems, of course. That's the biggest distinction right there. When we're trying to establish one's intent, what does motive do? Okay. When we look at the major classifications of crimes, we're looking at the big division in terms of seriousness. What types of crimes are we talking about? In criminal statutes, levels of seriousness. They were just to split that into two. What are the more serious and less serious types of crimes? There you go. Okay. Each of those, of course, have statutes, multiple statutes with degrees that will basically run like a range. Okay. Don't want to talk about that just yet. I don't think I do yet. We start talking about I don't yet. We'll come back to that in a second. Later section. I want to hit it as concise as possible. So next thing it is. Let's see. Okay. The different defenses. Different ways that we mount defenses, the difference between a partial and a complete defense. What is an affirmative defense? When we start talking about those Affirmative defenses, keep in mind what that does too. It doesn't necessarily move the burden of proof, it just adds another thing into the mix that has to be proven, right? And so that burden is actually going to be one of the few that's on the defense. Defenses. Ooh. When it comes to those types of crimes that have plans associated with them, we start moving into attempts and inchoate crimes. What are the different ways in which you can establish a defense for those? What are the different types of attempts and inchoate crimes, so incomplete crimes? And as you're dealing with those incomplete crimes, what are their defenses, right? Is there a list of those, right? Yeah. Abandonment, the different types of impossibilities, that kind of stuff. Let's see. Of course, the different levels of intent. You're going to need to know that. That's how we're going to start. No, that's right. Conspiracy, retribution. Okay, the time element. When we're establishing that time element, if I said the year and a day rule, what was it? Basically, if you start with the year and a day rule, it's a common law principle that rule that if there was some type of harm that had taken place, you had 1 year and 1 day for you to link those harms associated with those original acts. Remember back when we were really early in the semester, the medical interventions, technology, and that kind of stuff massively changed that. Now we have to do it as in terms of intervening acts and how much of a factor they are, meaning that they need to be a substantial factor, that kind of thing. With that phrase. And attendant circumstances. What are attendant circumstances? And aggravating and mitigating circumstances, right? So attendant circumstances are other things associated with the statute you have to establish in court, right? Some of those could be like aggravating or mitigating circumstances. As you do that, aggravating makes the crime more serious, mitigating less. Anything there. Let's see here. If you're talking about the Constitution of this country, whose purview is that? Well, that scares me. Why'd you guys get so quiet? You guys know who the purview constitutional issues, the sole body that has purview over those types of issues? United States Supreme Court. Supreme Court. That's the only ones. So that's one of the procedures lesson. When it comes down to constitutional issues, there's only one court that really deals with that. That's the Supreme Court. That's one of the few areas that they have original jurisdiction for Supreme Court constitutional issues. If you're dealing with state level constitutions, who would that be? State Supreme Court, right? Now, all states have Supreme Courts. You look at their highest appellate court. I think they're all called Supreme Courts, though. State Supreme Court. I need to look that one up. Okay, now that I said that, I can't remember, and I don't know for certain. But yeah, so you'd be talking about appellate courts. The highest one of the land is the one that has that jurisdiction. All right. Ooh, burden of proof. When we're talking about burden of proof, what are the different levels there? What are they? When are they needed? So if we're talking about the burden of proof needed for establishing guilt is what? burden of proof required to establish guilt. You need to prove guilt beyond a, there you go, reasonable doubt. So beyond a reasonable doubt, that's one of them, right? If you start going down, there's a whole bunch of different types, but the big ones, probably the next most important one, preponderance of the evidence, right? When you start getting into that one, what are you talking about there? Basically, more than likely is what you get at. That's civil court. That's also affirmative defenses. That can start looking at those. The lower standard there, echoing the balance for freedom versus guilt. If we're talking about, ooh, that took me off topic. What was I thinking? No, other ones. Clear and convincing evidence. Be familiar with what that one is. You also see those in scrutiny types too. That's another place where they have levels like that, where there's multiple levels that mean different things. It's like burden, review, honors of evidence, clear and convincing evidence. Those types of standards over types of scrutiny. It's like when you start dealing with that, it's what level do you need to establish that there is some good that comes out of that action kind of a thing, right? Same thing with this. What level do you need to establish for you to take that specific action? Let's see. Oh, well, we're talking about crimes of intent, or crimes of intent, crimes that are incompleted and intent. What types of intent do you need here? That's it, right? When you start getting into that, what you're dealing with there is essentially the difference in the type of intent one has if someone's doing something on purpose versus not, right? That recklessness stuff. It's like they don't have intent isn't as specific if you move down in seriousness. Okay. Watch the evidence. Ooh, that's a fun one. See if there's anything else I want to talk about before I get to that. No, you guys remember the Latin stuff, right? Actus reus, mens rea, that kind of stuff. Good. Good. If I said, what's the difference between a justifiable and an excusable homicide? Those things includes the other. One of those is not. Right? I'll leave it that one for you guys. That's an important one. You should know that one on your own. All right. What's the difference between homicide and murder? You guys know what the difference is between those things? Sort of like the difference between this, right? Excusable is the overarching framework here. Justifiable is just one type. Just like the topic. What's it again? Yeah. Homicide versus murder. Murder being that specific intent. Homicide being the act of killing someone at any point in time. So, what's the difference between assault and battery? Ooh, just some questions that can delve into that for a little bit. Those different types of defense, be familiar with what they are. Be familiar with well, I lost the train of thought there. Was there interactions with that last topic we were just talking about? Lost the train of thought there. When we start talking about the defenses, be familiar with which ones are kind of similar, which ones are different. For example, if I said homicide versus murder, justifiable, excusable. Another one would be necessity versus duress, right? You're talking about similar situations, but there's a small distinction there, right? Be familiar with those types of things. If I said aspiratation, what does it I mean? Ooh. Keep my mind on this one. So I didn't have too many questions that got into that. Moral turpitude, that kind of a thing. I saw one question that might kind of get into that territory. We get into it a little bit whenever we're talking about felonies versus misdemeanors. That's where you'll run into some of those phrases like depraved heart, those types of things. You start getting into those moral aspects. I don't think that came up otherwise. It's not as it's consistent across states as the rest of the laws associated there. With that should basically get you ready for this one. Any questions? No. Okay. How long did that take us? About 20 minutes? Yeah, excellent. So you guys ready to roll off into the next chapter? Cool. All right, so we're going to start moving off into property crime now. And so we dealt with it a little bit when we talk about robbery, but robbery itself, of course, is where's my mouse at? It's over here. Let's grab one of these old ones. I don't think I've uploaded that next one. Boom. Grab that. Download. And yeah, I don't care to save it. And then this one. Yeah, open file. Cool. All right, so we dealt with this a little bit whenever we're dealing with robbery. Robbery being the one that's a little bit different because people are involved directly. You're taking it from the person, though it is something that it focuses in on that material good. Home invasions were also included in that because of that particularly threatening nature of it. Now that we're getting off into the property crimes, probably the first thing I want to talk to you all is numbers, right? So if you think about it in any given year, those numbers, what they look like. So we've been dealing with the most serious stuff. So if we were to look at this as if we were trying to measure down and look at it, it would be like this. Increases this way, seriousness increases this way, right? We start out dealing with the most serious stuff. What's that? Murder, violence. Now we're moving off into property. Any idea what that number looks like? What that breakdown looks like? Big number, bigger number, something like that. No clue. Okay. All right. So the big thing to remember is this: you get more serious crimes. They happen with less frequently, but we look at that percentage rate. You need to realize just how many more crimes you're dealing with here, because that's going to be one that looks literally like this kind of a thing, right? As you deal with property crimes are the most common, really the most common type of crime that there are, right? When you start looking at the numbers, the breakdowns, and that kind of thing, it's like if you look at the number of murders in a given city in a given year, you'll be looking at what is it? I'll go blow up. Usually, you're talking less than 200 people, somewhere around 150 for a population of about 200,000, I think, just for that city. Got about 500,000 in a few miles kind of thing. And as you're dealing with that, a couple hundred seems like a lot. And, that's more than, a couple of weeks. It's like about 3 weeks, 4 weeks, something like that. How many property crimes do you think took place in that same period of time? You're talking thousands, right? You talk about in the course of a year, tens of thousands easy. So that cut rate's a lot different. So you have to deal with these things a lot more frequently. So this one, I think, actually starts out with lower level stuff. So stuff that's more frequent in nature. But we'll deal with the rest of that here in a second. So the first thing it starts out with is larceny and theft. Go ahead and share a screen now. Since we actually have a PowerPoint up. Share the right one. Looks like I did. All right, chat in case anyone has anything they want to say. Cool. All right, so the oldest common law theft crime. This is. Why? Why would this be the oldest law crime of theft? Any ideas? Any thoughts? It's fun, Tom. Okay. Think about one's material possessions throughout all of history, how much stuff most people had on average, right? Absolutely nothing. You've got a few property holders, a couple kings and queens kind of thing. Most everybody else, extreme poverty. Like there's not much here kind of thing. So you're going to be dealing with that. It's kind of funny if you really start to deal with it. One of the more interesting conversations to have related to this topic. Of course, talk about common law elements here in a second. We'll get into punishments right after that, because when we start talking about it, you'll see how quickly and how much this stuff's changed and in what kinds of time periods. Okay. Common law elements: trespass, retaking, that aspiratation element, personal property of another with that intent to steal, right? And so we start dealing with this one over time. Theft is very, very, very common. What are the punishments now if you steal something? What are the ranges there? Worldwide. Oh shit, too much coffee today. Already had 4 cups. Yes, it's been one of those days. All right, so punishments for theft across time and across history go from what to what? Yes. Okay, what's the least severe punishment you could get for anything? Get pulled over for going 3 miles an hour, 3 miles an hour over the speed limit. What's going to happen? Yeah, nothing. Right. And so, depending on cultures, depending on times, depending on circumstances, that looks exactly like nothing. Right. That's still true here to this day. You can figure out a way to a loophole, free pile of money. Right. That'd be like politics and stock market trading. Right. You basically start talking about people who can affect the stock market who can not trade directly, well, indirectly. And so, yeah, something like that. Or kings and queens, right? I want more of your food. Wedding day, I'll take that person, right? I get the first night. King, like, ew, right? Range all the way from there to it's the highest punishment, most severe. Yeah. Range is all in between there, right? And so basically what you'll look at, if you look across the world, you'll see some cultures, you do this, start moving body parts, right? That's a lot more closer to this than where we're at today. Here in this society, depending on what the dollar figure is, it is still zero, right? Many places where they'll have actual prosecutors or politicians make public statements. We're not going to enforce this type of crime. That's what they're saying. We start talking about death. So that's one way that we can handle it here. We can handle it with nothing. Now, that's something we still kind of do. We don't handle it with death anymore. But how long ago was it we used to handle it with death? Here. Any ideas? Not that long ago. It's like what, 3, 4? Well, for me, it'd be like 4 generations ago, 3 generations ago, probably 4 for you all. Right? Stole my horse. Yeah, I shot him dead. No, we don't care. He was trying to steal your horses. We really don't care. Right? What are we talking about? It's theft. He was talking theft. Why is it so serious, though? Why would you have more severe punishments for something like this? Let's ask you why. Should we punish? Question mark. How many people say yes? How many people say no? Have anybody who says yes? And everybody here in the classroom, what about you all online? Punish theft or no? We'll stop the share for a second. Make sure you guys can see everything. All right. If you're actually there online, that would be the time to type into the chat box to say yes or no, whether or not we should punish theft. If you've got nothing to say, well, that means that you're awaiting the outcome. I'm starting to question what role you have in this class. No, I'm just kidding. I mean, you're a criminal. No, I'm just kidding. But seriously, I'm waiting to see who types in one. And that one's going to be the attendance for a while. So basically, most people agree that we should punish it. Those of you who are actually here, those of you who are not. Of course, it's you. Thank you for sounding on. That means one person is actually alive online. Yes. Yeah, it could be corpses. Maybe the end of the world's already happened. Everyone says we should. How much? The reason why it used to be here, a lot of reasons, right? One, you have the resource deprivation. 2, think about it. What does your horse represent back a couple generations ago? And on the value and quantity of items stolen. That's a good way to do it. Yeah, that's how we do it. We base it off the dollar figure at a couple different cut points, which is kind of interesting because they don't really equate to anything anymore. But you live in a rural area, that horse represents your life, that kind of thing. How do you get from one place to another? Horse. What are you going to use as you're doing your field? Horse. That kind of thing. And so it's like the sensitivities there, the detriment associated with it was more serious. So we treat it more seriously. We also were a lot more strict with how we dealt with it. I don't know if we talked about that in here. That'd be a different class. We talked about the role of like the exclusionary rule, for example, that only exists because we've finally decided to realize that, hey, people's individual rights matter more than catching criminals. Right. All right. So trespass, retaking, carrying away personal property of another. Straightforward. Right. And so we have one person online. I like that one person. Next up, trespass, retaking. So when we start talking about taking, the first thing that comes up is that role of possession. We talked about possession in here. So possession here with this, it works the same way as it works with anything else. So my favorite thing to talk about with this one, because most people that they know how this stuff is treated. And if it applies this way here, it applies the same way kind of everywhere else. Think about the way that people have been in possession of drugs, how they treat their drugs. It's the same kind of a thing, right? Whose drugs are they? Who's in actual possession of them versus constructive? That I don't know. I'm gonna make it up. Actual possession. What does that look like? Yeah, it's in your hand. Yeah, you literally it's right here. Yes. So what do we mean by constructive? Is it still in your possession? Yeah. You're a police officer, you pulled over somebody's vehicle, right? You can't, the reason you pulled it over is because you can't see anything. It's too smoky in the vehicle. Roll down the vehicle's windows. They roll down windows as you pull them over. Vehicles come broken, billowing out. You know exactly what's going on there, right? Um, there's drugs in that vehicle. Who's getting the charge? Is the person whose hands that drugs in? Is the person who's driving the vehicle? Someone else. Somebody, whoever cops do it. That's mine, right? But that's usually what will happen. Someone will admit to it, even if you have to put pressure on it. It doesn't have to be in their actual possession. Right? Who brought the drugs into the car? Who paid for the drugs? Kind of thing. Same item here, same way of looking at it. Who bought the thing? Whose is it? It belongs to them. Okay, that's my boat, but I'm going to let Johnny borrow it. He's going to take it out to the lake and cruise around for a little. It's still my boat. Here's where it gets better. Instead of it just being my boat, I'm going to take it out on the river and drive it down the river a little bit. He has my boat. He also has my drugs. Right? Those are still my drugs in the vehicle, in the boat. They're in my possession, even though he's the one who's driving. Okay. So legal doctrine referring to the condition of having power to control an item along with the intent to do so. Yeah, that's what they're talking about there. So constructive versus actual, something will come up in quite different areas. This also relates to seizures if you're over in procedures. You take procedures. Because that's next semester, I think. Same kind of way here. You're going to stop someone. There's laying hands on somebody, and then it's just like, hey, you mind stopping right there for a second? Okay. Stop. Same kind of thing. Constructive. Actually, since like, would you mind? That was more of a question. I'd say stop right there. So it's a statement that's constructive. Something interesting here. So they make a distinction here: grand versus petty. Petty larceny. Typically, here you start looking for the $500 and $1,000 mark kind of thing. I want to call your attention right here, though. Larceny by trick. All right, so that's a little bit about history in this country. What is that? Deceptively obtaining possession of goods from a victim who surrenders possessions voluntarily and without knowledge of the deceit involved. Is that sound like something we should allow? That's something we should criminalize. Realize that historically, that's when we allow it. That one was, I forget the exact time frame whenever that one was criminalized, but historically, that was allowed. You're not smart enough to manage your own money, become someone else's, right? Survival of the fittest kind of thing. Like calling you out, come on. Here it talks about Bailey, Baylor. that's whenever you start getting into bigger shipments of things. Basically, bailor is a person who trusts goods, so this person actually has possession of something in large quantities. What they do here is you'll see that term bailee will come up whenever they're entrusted. But for those who are given whatever that bulk item is, I'm not having here. Maybe it's in the notes or something where it talks about conversion, or maybe it's later on. Basically, when we start dealing with conversion, bulk items, if you have some type of possession, you have that actual possession and constructive possession. Deal with this one right here. So how do you tell if something that's constructively possessed by someone else, a company or whatever, say you're shipping something, you're in possession of it, but it's really someone else's? How can you tell if someone's like embezzling something, taking something out of it, or actually, it becoming theirs? They call that conversion. In some way, some shape, some process, you're converting into your own. I'm saying here, I had in here where it mentions the act of breaking open, that kind of thing. So that way you're starting to have that kind of a trespass there as well. All right, here's Arkansas or Oklahoma statute. Larceny is taking a personal property accomplished by fraud, stealth, intent to deprive a person thereof. All right, so that intent's a big, important facet of it too. Yeah, let's talk about that for a second. So grand larceny is that $1,000 mark here in the state. If it's less than that, it's petty larceny. Intent. What is the difference between what's the difference between stealing and borrowing something? I'll ask you guys that. What are your definitions? What else? It's a good answer. I thought about that. I don't know. I mean, I borrowed my neighbor's lawnmower like 6 years back, and that was 2 neighbors ago. Let's see. Is that borrowing it still? How do you know when something's lent out has become stolen? You can't get it back. Spelled that correctly. I might have misspelled that. That's funny. I think I misspelled that. Permanence. I don't remember. I look at it, it's even more funny. Anyway, yeah, that time element's a huge part of it, right? So that's the big distinction right here. Permission, ideally, but that's one of those things that whenever you start really getting into, it's a social kind of thing. Is there enough cues there to say that I would think it's acceptable for me to come and borrow your stuff, right? How close is our relationship? How open are you? That kind of a thing. And so those are some avenues for seeing some of the nuance there. Really, right here, that intent, this. I'll give you an example. I can't give you that example. I don't want to give you that example. Let me think of a different example for a second. I really want to get out of that. I'm just wrong with that example. Okay. I'll change some things up. We'll set the context differently. We'll say it's money. You have inherited $100,000. You send it off to your manager. How do you know if that person's embezzling? You gotta watch the numbers, that kind of thing. You gotta go try to get the money, and then you have to have that. Oh, it's not there, right? You have to have that permanence of it. The other example is going to be, let's say, you got two people on a bank account. One person should not be on there. We'll say it's a bank account they shouldn't have possession of in the first place. So that makes it easier, right? One person in control of a bank account they shouldn't have, rather than going through the process of transferring it over within the bank. They close the account and mail off the check. The address. Send it to the wrong address, right? Did you not send it at all? Where did it go? Is it gone forever? Once it's, you can prove that someone has that intent to permanently deprive someone of that. That's when you move into the theft. It has to have that permanence. Otherwise, it's just a temporary obstruction of one's possessory interest. And larceny. So the dollar distinction's there. That's the one that makes this distinct, not the intent, but the dollar. This changes from the well, not necessarily changes from the property, from the Cummings persons. It's just we view this a little bit different. We put dollars to it. Burglary. This is one can compare it to robbery. This is the one without persons, right? So you're entering someone's home. Notice that this is a common law element here. Common law elements are listed here. Breaking and entering of a dwelling of another during the nighttime with the intent to commit a felony therein. So there's a few different elements there. Breaking and entering, we've already talked about. That one's pretty simple. When you get beyond that, the dwelling of another, domiciles, that kind of thing, start dealing with houses. That nighttime element was one of those that was actually a pretty serious one because it was at night. It's viewed as more serious. One, because the likelihood that people are home increases. In fact, if you start looking at these statutes in particular, that the intent to commit a felony therein, that one has some particular historical importance. Basically, that caveat was one that ties directly into Tennessee versus Garner. You've heard that name before, probably. If you haven't, you should take particular note of that name because you'll hear it again in other classes. Basically, what you have here is a way to make lower level crimes more serious. Like this is typically tends to be a misdemeanor kind of thing. Tennessee itself, with that element right there, that intent. No, it's the nighttime element. Since it's during the nighttime, people could be home, it was automatically classified as felony, right? That intent to commit a felony, right? How much money you're taking, that kind of thing. That's when you start getting into those distinctions. Tennessee versus Garner, realized what happened there. You guys aren't familiar with that case. It was nighttime burglary of a residence. Basically, what had happened was the house was empty. Neighbor saw what was going on, called the police. Police showed up. It was two officers. One went to the front door. The other one went around the back to head off the person should they run. Person went to the front door. Suspect ran out the back. Being as it was the case that set this precedent, basically what happened there was suspect did not stop flight. prior to Tennessee versus Garner, if you're a felon fleeing the scene, any level of force was authorized. Any level, so deadly force. So whenever the person kept fleeing, he decided to climb a fence. As he climbed the fence off, he pulled out a gun, right in the head, to drop him. What had happened? Empty home, stolen a purse, and $10. Okay, and those actions versus the life taken. They decided that that's not proportionate. So we don't handle it that way anymore. But do catch that distinction there when you start making that distinction between felony and misdemeanor, why it matters so much, that seriousness element of it, and the ways it's been used across time, right? We talk about literally at the micro level. This one was during the time of day, right? Those elements matter and how it's set up. More serious aspects to that punishment. Curtilage and restraining order, those two things we need to talk about, I guess. Curtilage. In here, we used to talk about that from a policing perspective, so I'll have to stop and think about that for a second. Yeah. Basically, what they're talking about here is the area that's next to your home. We should put that in here. I know that's in the classes right now. We talked about that with our last class, or maybe the classes ago. Essentially, there's no real clear way to identify what someone's curtilage is. It's just identified as that area around your home that's a bit more protected. A bit more protected. There are 4 factors involved in identifying it. It's nature's purpose of use, how far from the home you're talking about, this location or this front, whatever it is. Is it enclosed in a fence or something like that to identify it as section off? And then the 4th one would be steps taken to secure from sight. Right. So that's why they talk about enclosed ground, these types of things immediately surrounding, so how close it is, fence, and again they talk about close again. Right. Restraining orders. What is that talking about those? I'm actually surprised that I didn't have that earlier. Control of brain versus something. Yeah, that should be earlier on. You can have those come up in burglary stuff, but that one actually should have been. I'm not sure why I have that one in there. That would have been better into the self-defense stuff. Tied up in the statutes or something. No, I don't see why that part's in there. That might have been a leftover. We're out of time. All right, so here's where it starts talking about the different degrees. We'll pick up with that one next time. Basically, what you start talking about is that area of the home. You're going to burglarize it, burgle it. It's not just within the home. So that breaking and entering kind of thing, it doesn't necessarily have to be the areas around the home too, that kind of stuff. But we'll pick up with burglary in the 1st degree next time. With that, I'll open up the exam. I'm probably here within the next couple minutes. It will be, what is it? Standard 90 minutes, that kind of a thing. 100 points. Have fun. If y'all need anything, let me know. You'll have at least a week to get it in. And have a great weekend. See you on Monday. Bye. Now let's see if anybody shows up to be here in person for policing. And so we really only have one person in here who's online, I guess. I don't know. Maybe you guys are signing off now because it's getting close to time. Or are you waiting for me to hang out? Are you guys really there? There we go.
How was your day?
You too. There we go.